Dale, thank you so much for an introduction that my father would appreciate and that my mother would actually believe. So I appreciate that. Where I'm sitting, this is really loud. Are you guys okay? I could get fired up at some point, so I don't want to hurt anything. So I want to start off with a little trip down memory lane. When I was growing up, had a certain sweet tooth, and whenever I got my hands on a little bit of money, I would run off to the local, I guess now we call them convenience stores, back then they were liquor stores, and purchase a package of grape now-and-laters. See, some people went, the grape now-and-laters, yes, grape now-and-laters. And I would love a little bit of help from you all to, is there, when you were a kid, was there a particular thing that you liked to go to the store to buy when you had a little bit of money? Does somebody have, yes?
Baseball cards.
Baseball cards, lovely, okay. With the bubble gum, of course. Somebody else had a, yeah?
Pixie sticks.
Pixie sticks, I like it, okay, that's good, pixie sticks, that's good. Yeah?
Jawbreakers.
Jawbreakers, cannot go wrong with jawbreakers. Anybody else have a, yeah? Turkish taffy. Now, would that, remind me what a Turkish, I don't remember help me with the Turkish taffy.
Stuff that's really good for your teeth.
Aha. Okay, yeah, your dentist was excited about that. Okay. One more, does anybody, yes?
Chico sticks.
Say it again?
Chico sticks.
Chico sticks?
Peanut butter stick.
Oh, the peanut butter stick, yes. Okay, so, everything that you guys bought was wrong. Just want to point that out. It was all about the grape now and later. And for those of you who don't know the grape now and later, let me explain it to you. Much like the taffy, it was a slightly harder than gelatinous piece of taffy-like substance. It was a very high fructose corn syrup content. Very important. I'm a fan of the color purple, as some people know. So the grape now and later had an inside track. Yes, Karma knows. And the other part about the grape now and later for me, though, is that all the other flavors were just horrid. I mean, a banana flavored now and later is just like one of the worst things on the planet, right? And she's like, no, don't do it, right? And for those of you who don't know, it's called a now and later because there were 6 in the package, right? And you could eat some now, you could save some for later, right? Now and later. Now, the reason I tell that story is because, I'm fond of it. It is one of my more fond memories. But it also helps point out something that, for me, is sort of a big deal. And it's because I knew early on, whenever I secured a dime, because that's how much it costs to get now-and-laters, I knew exactly what I was going to buy at the store. I mean, I could know days in advance what I was going to purchase because, and here's the important thing, dimes, when I was growing up, could only buy you now-and-laters, right? So, I mean, it was really simple, right? It was sort of, which flavor now-and-later do you like? We've already decided banana's a no-go, right? Chocolate, not gonna happen, right? There was a sour apple thing that some people dug, right? But really, I only liked, of the entire panoply of options, right? I only liked grape. And it turns out that for me, when I think about it, that limited options, the fact that I could know in advance what I was gonna purchase with my dime, that to me is sort of the definition of being poor. Right, because I had 0 options, right? I had 1 dime, there was 1 option at the 1 store that I had access to. That was it. I mean, it didn't matter how much in advance I thought about it. It didn't matter if I got 2 dimes, I was getting 2 packets of grape now-and-laters. Right, that was it, right? In fact, today, one of the ways that I tell myself that I'm not poor is I'll be driving down the street and see a 7-Eleven and just pull over, right? And the only rule I have for myself is not to know what I'm going to buy when I walk in, right? As long as I don't know what I'm going to buy when I walk in, right? That to me is sort of the definition of not being poor. Now, there are way better definitions of that, I understand, but for me, right, that's the pinnacle of it for me. Now there's a guy named John Scalzi who wrote a blog. He writes a blog, it's called the Whatever blog, but he wrote a particular entry, it's called Being Poor. And it has a whole list of things that for him, like the great knowledge are for me, are sort of the definition of being poor. I want to share some of those with you. Being poor is knowing exactly how much everything costs. Being poor is hoping the toothache goes away. Being poor is knowing your kid goes to a friend's house, or goes to friends' houses, but never has friends come over to yours. Being poor is hoping your kids don't have a growth spurt. Being poor is a bathtub you have to empty into the toilet. Being poor is people angry at you just for walking around in the mall. Being poor is picking the 10-cent ramen instead of the 12-cent ramen because that's 2 extra packages for every dollar. Being poor is having to live with the choices you didn't know you made when you were 14 years old. Being poor is deciding that it's all right to base a relationship on shelter. Being poor is people who have never been poor wondering why you chose to be so. Being poor is knowing how hard it is to stop being poor. Being poor is seeing how few options you have. Now, one of the things I like most about this blog is that once he posted it, a lot of other people who saw it began posting their own thoughts. And so I want to share some of those with you as well from the comment section. A lady named Sunny says, from someone who's been there and can still see it in the rearview mirror, these are dead on. If I might add a few from personal experience. Being poor is your kids getting excited on dumpster hunt day because that's the only time they get to eat real food, like cookies, fresh fruit, and desserts. Being poor is staying with a man who beats your kids because you can't afford to keep them out of foster care without his salary. Being poor means making decisions like, is stealing food a sin outside of an ethics class? Being poor is finally realizing that when your mom says you can be anything you want, she doesn't really believe it, but feels she has to keep saying it anyway to keep the whole family from falling into despair-based lifestyles. Iona says, being poor is laying down because it hurts to breathe and you're pregnant, but you can't afford to go to the hospital. Being poor means swallowing your pride and walking into the food stamp office because you don't want your kids to go hungry, then sitting there smiling while some social worker gleefully humiliates you as she goes over your application. Another person says, being poor means selling blood plasma and signing up for every medical experiment that they'll give you, and breezing past the disclaimer form because, really? Are you going to give up $100 just because you may be risking injury or death from what they're doing to you? Barbara says, being poor is hearing your daughter tell you 20 years later that she finally realized that mama already ate, sweetie, was a lie. Trance says, being poor is wondering just what else you can sell on eBay. Being poor is wishing there was some way you can make others understand that you're not lazy, ignorant, careless, or contagious. Another person says, being poor is realizing your one parent has given up on themselves, but not given up on you. Kevin says, poor is many different things for many different people. It's relative to those within society and the community that you live. But Mother Teresa nailed it when she said, loneliness is the worst form of poverty. And back to Sonia. She says, being poor is discovering that letter from Duke University naming you as one of 3 advanced students in your class invited to test out of high school early into their scholarship program is just so much fire starter because the $300 it costs to take the test may as well be $3 million. And despair is finally realizing at nearly 36 years old and with a barely afforded AA in English from a community college, just where you could have been by now had you had $300 and what that missed opportunity has truly cost you. Now, because I grew up with people like Sonny, I dedicated my life to serving people through leadership. And if you go out to the LE website right now, you'll see a nice, pretty site that talks about the cutting-edge practices of adaptive leadership. But it turns out that those practices are really based upon age-old principles. Principles that have been around for thousands and thousands of years, right? The principles upon which my faith tradition is based upon from 2,000 years ago, Christianity. The principles that the concept of servant leadership is based upon. The principles, frankly, that the Center for Ethical Leadership are based upon. And I boil it down to the eternal, unwavering commitment to look people like Sonny in the eye and say, you are not alone. To say, no matter what, you are not alone. See, the Center for Ethical Leadership to me is about leadership in community for community. And I'd like to tell you a couple of stories about that, if that's okay. The first is a story that many of you are familiar with. It's one of my favorites, and it's been around for a really long time. It's called the Starfish story. Many of you could tell this story along with me. Feel free, chime in if you want. It's about a kid who's walking down a beach, and he seems to stop from time to time and throw something in the water, or so says the guy, or so thinks the guy who's walking towards the beach from the other direction. He sees the kid walk a couple of steps, bend over, pick something up, throw it in the water, walk a couple of steps, pick something up, throw it in the water, and as the guy gets closer and closer, he realizes that what the kid is picking up are starfish. Now there's starfish strewn across the beach, and as he gets closer to the kid, he says, young man, what are you doing? And the kid says, well, there was a storm last night, and the starfish on the beach are dying. And I'm picking them up, and I'm throwing them back in the water. The guy goes, you can't possibly save all of these starfish. I mean, there's too many of them. You can't possibly make a difference. And the little kid picks one up, throws it in the water, and says, I made a difference to that one. Now that's a great story about the importance of taking individual actions. I love the principle behind that story, but I have to tell you, as a guy who was one of those starfish, it is not acceptable to walk past the others that are on the beach. How is that acceptable? How is that okay? That's not the principle of you not being alone. That's not the principle of me not being alone. I mean, but for the grace of God, had someone not come along and picked me up and proven to me that I'm not alone, I wouldn't be here before you today. And I dare say you wouldn't be here today. How is that acceptable? I wish the story went this way. I wish that the kid bounded out of bed in the morning because he knew that there was a storm coming. He'd heard that there was a storm coming, so the moment his eyes open up, he jumps out of bed, grabs a shovel in one hand and a bucket in the other, and runs to the beach. And he's picking up as many starfish as he possibly can. And he throws them back in the water because that's his beach. No starfish will die on his beach. And when he looks down the beach and sees someone coming, it's not a guy standing all by himself. There are plenty of people there because they all knew that there was a storm coming. How could we not know that there was a storm coming? And there are hundreds of people with buckets and shovels on that beach. They decided, this is our beach. No one dies on our beach. The reason we're here today is to celebrate some people who have made that decision. The winners of our award today have made that decision. They have said that kids are going to be successful. It's not okay for any one of them not to be successful. This is our beach. They have said that we're going to grow the food that we need. We're going to do it in an appropriate and sustainable way. This is our beach. I mean, let's face it, one of them is actually here because of what they've done on an actual beach, right? I mean, they've, the Rainier Beach community. So that's why I'm here. And respectively, I want to ask you all the same question. Why are you here? Now, I'm sure you knew that there was going to be some nice food. I'm sure you knew that There are going to be some people, some nice folks at the table with you, but I suspect that the reason that you are here is because the principles of ethical leadership are things that you actually believe in. I mean, I suspect that you're here for reasons beyond simply networking and saying hi, that you are here for real reasons. And so the first thing I wanted to do was tell you a story, but now I would like to give you a gift. I want to give you the gift of time to think about why you're here. Like, what is your life's work? What is your beach? What is the thing that you're willing to defend with all that you have? And I want you just to take a moment, close your eyes if you need to, but just take a moment and think about that. I mean, what is the thing that you are willing to sacrifice everything for to make sure no one dies on your beach? And now I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning to do that life's work. I want you to imagine jumping out of bed with a shovel in one hand and a bucket in the other and running down to your beach. I want you to imagine picking up starfish every step of the way. And when you look up and you see someone in the distance, that's the Center for Ethical Leadership. They are showing up with people, leaders, in community, for community. Now, the thing that most people don't realize is that while the commitment here is you will not be alone, that commitment is not merely to people like Sonny. It's not to the starfish. It's the fact that you, as leaders, are not alone. Collaborative leadership, ethical leadership is about us doing it together in community. You're not alone. So you have chosen your beach. You have taken your stand. And I'd like to make an ask. Now, somebody else is going to come along later and make an ask about money and supporting the center, and I think that that's a great thing. I hope that they're successful. I hope that you reach deep in your pockets to support that, but that's not the ask that I want to make. I want to make the ask that as you run down to your beach, that you invite the Center for Ethical Leadership onto the beach with you. You see, they're committed to the idea that you, as a leader, that is hard work, that is difficult work, but they're committed to the idea that you are not alone. You are the leaders of our community. With the center, you are leaders in community. They are living proof of that age-old adage. You're not alone. My name is James Whitfield. I thank you so much for your time this evening.